Okay, here's some feedback on Lesson Plan Evaluation 3. I hope you're all having a good weekend. And if you have any questions on my comments here, please let me know. The way that this works is that I do look at all the comments, but I do not provide grades or feedback individually just because there are so many students across the different sections. That's just not efficient. So what I do is I go over what you could say, what I think you should have picked, but also those things that I would probably go along with if you made a case for them. So, first question, to what degree does this lesson possess alignment? I believe that the best answer here is one essential part is misaligned. And again, the key parts we're talking about are the learning objectives, the instruction, and the assessments here. We're not going to worry about standards and things like that. The learning objective, students will learn the amendments listed in the Bill of Rights. Now, this is pretty ambiguous. It could be recall, it could be comprehension, it could even be application or analysis. It's really hard to tell. Based on all the instruction and the tasks, right, she goes over describing what they are. She wants students to write a paragraph explaining it, so it's clearly going beyond recall. So I don't think that goal is a recall goal. And then she also wants them to come up with 2 problems that would arise if the country didn't have it. There are some enrichment and some support activities as well. The problem is that when you look at the first 10 amendment worksheet, it's really just a matching task. And so you have a big issue there where you're teaching to comprehension or application or more, but then you're assessing at a recall or not sure what the overall goal is, but it could, if it's either one of those, there's a third thing that's wrong. So that to me is the best answer. You could say, depending on how you interpreted this, that multiple essential parts are misaligned, but I don't think you can make a case for a 3. For learning progressions, in this case, I do think that the lesson plan builds knowledge specifically and intentionally, going from this introduction of what rights are, difference between privileges. It's a misconception. We'll get to that later. Going through the explicit instruction, having students complete the Bill of Rights worksheet so they have a resource, then picking one amendment and going through and actually describing it, putting their own words and thinking of problems that might arise. There are also the differentiation things that could occur. And that's good in terms of the learning progression. The assessment isn't usually connected to that, but it could be. And so if you wanted to connect the assessment, you could go down to a 2, but otherwise I think a 3 is the best way to go. For a meaningful context, right? In this case, a real world context is given in the sense that they ask what rights they have, and that could be good. And that could tip you up to a 3, but that's really just in the introduction. It doesn't really get at the idea about why each one of these rights are important to each individual. Now, however, when you get to the independent working time, where they are picking one, right, and then they're trying to come up with 2 different problems, you could go all the way to a 3 again here. But in my experience with working with students, and there's a focus on just trying to get the right answer, you think of what does the textbook say would happen if we didn't have these things. And it may not matter to a kid if there is no freedom of the press, right, or freedom of speech in any real way, because they don't experience that in their home or in school or anything like that, right? So I don't think that it really would get to a 3, but you could argue that it would get to a 3. I think that a real world context is given, but it's probably not going to mean a lot to most students. If we look at differentiated supports, there are relevant enrichments and supports or extensions and scaffolds, so that works there. I suppose you could argue in some ways that this isn't really that great of a scaffold and you go down to a 2, but I think that the enrichment activity does extend it and get them to apply it to their life, so I think a 2 or a 3 would work. I think 3 is the best answer. Again, you can debate me on that one if you like. Targeting misconceptions, the big one here is the whole idea that trying to differentiate between rights and privileges. And she does a good job of that. So not a lot going on there. If you didn't count that, I'm not sure why. I guess there are some other things that you could do in here as well, but I think that's the biggest one. When we think about student assets, we talk about prior academic learning. There's some attempt to activate some things here, but there is no specific mention of a review. She does try to get them involved in rights that they have, so that's taking us up towards the 3, right? But that is just one kind of thing. You could argue with 3, saying that this is activating prior knowledge, but maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Saying that it was reviewing material they had already learned about is definitely then activating prior knowledge. But it seems to me as though the teacher is really just using student interests in things that they have rights about, and so on. So I think a 2 is better. When we think about planning assessments, there is, you could say, again, depending on how you looked at the goal, either the instructions out of alignment with the goal or the assessments out of alignment with the goal. If you thought that students will learn the amendments listed in the Bill of Rights as a recall task, looking at the assessment and thinking, what is she going to do to support this assessment? Well, in that case, right, the assessment is in alignment, but it's only at 1 point, so it would be a 2. I would totally go with the 1 here, saying that the assessment is out of alignment with the goal, because the goal, based on the instruction, is way higher than just recall, and the assessment itself is just recall. So that's it. If you have any questions, go ahead and ask. All you have to do to get the full points is look at what the answers are, think about it, take the quiz again, and put in the right answers. These are meant for practice and so on. So just to get you ready for what the final will be like. The final and the practice final both have a section on them just like this. So when we get to the practice final in another 3 or 4 weeks, you'll see one more of these, and then there will be the final while you do it. And in those cases, I do actually read and comment on all the justifications. So if you're wondering about whether or not something you said would work, shoot me an email and let me know, and I'll give you a direct response. All right. Look for some more feedback on the assessment quiz.